The Pittsburgh Penguins welcome in the Vancouver Canucks for their annual Thanksgiving Eve game on Wednesday, and Pat and I are going to get you all set for that game right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes. You can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes, joined by the best host on the planet, Patrick Camp. You can follow him on all social media platforms at Synonym for Wet, and you can follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen/watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, Penguins Canucks, it comes your way Wednesday evening from PBG Paints Arena. And Pat, it feels like these two teams always play one another on the annual Thanksgiving Eve game in Pittsburgh. It's a lot of fun when these two teams meet. They played two great games against one another last year, and I'm hoping for something similar in this game in Pittsburgh. We'll do more of an in-depth preview coming up here in the second segment. But to start off today's show, it looks like we're going to see some lineup changes tonight from Mike Sullivan and company. This is according to Sullivan during his pregame press conference. Blake Lizotte, he is a game time decision. So usually in Sullivan terms, that means he's going to play. And I'm pretty excited about that. He's had multiple concussions this year, which has really limited, his in-game availability. And considering that both you and I were pretty excited about that signing during the offseason, I really want to see what he can do with, a pretty big runway here, just because he really hasn't played that much this season due to the concussions. Cody Glass, he won't play. Tristan Jarry, he was the first goaltender off, so it looks like he's going to be getting the start in this game. And then this comes courtesy of Jason Mackey of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. He said Matt Grzelcyk and Ryan Graves were both on the ice a bit longer than usual, while Ryan Shea and Owen Pickering came off normal time. I also looked into this a little bit, and I can confirm that I have heard that both Ryan Graves and Matt Grzelcyk are scheduled to be scratched tonight. Again, that's just what I've heard. Hopefully that comes true, but it appears as of right now, the plan is to scratch both Ryan Graves and Matt Grzelcyk, which I think is a long time coming especially for 24. I think it's past time to see what you can do with some of these younger players in the lineup. If both 24 and 27 are indeed scratched in this game, as I heard from a couple other people, I think the pairings you will see on defense will be Owen Pickering with Chris Letang, Marcus Pettersson, Erik Karlsson, and then Ryan Shea and Jack St. Ivany. And that last pairing, we saw a little bit of that pairing to end last season. Their numbers together were pretty decent. It's been weird that Mike Sullivan really hasn't gone back to that pairing, at least for the first month and change of the season. It looks like as of right now, we could be seeing it for the first time tonight. But Pat, what are your thoughts on these lineup changes? And are you excited about the potential of seeing these new look pairings?
For sure. One other thing to add as well that kind of gives us the indication that Blake Lizotte will play tonight. Valtteri Puustinen cleared waivers and is likely to be on his way back to Wilkes-Barre Scranton, which means that Lizotte is going to be the corresponding move to keep them at the 23-man roster limit. So that kind of gives the game away that Lizotte will be ready to go for tonight's game. I overall have a couple thoughts, especially on the defense side of it. It's good that we're finally seeing Sullivan scratch Matt Grzelcyk after what has been an abysmal start to the campaign this year. I will say this as well before I get into the actual pairings. If nothing else, you can treat this as a reset for Matt Grzelcyk, because we have certainly seen over the years, and just with other teams as well, if you give a guy some time away, if you healthy scratch him, put him in the press box, let him work on his game in practice, he can maybe come back a little better. I'm skeptical that that's going to happen with Grzelcyk, because it kind of feels like he is who he is. But at this point, you have Jack St. Ivany and Ryan Shea, who have either been serviceable or shown flashes of being capable of playing in a National Hockey League lineup. So you might as well take advantage of that and finally pull the trigger on scratching Matt Grzelcyk. As for Ryan Graves, I think this is kind of how it's going to work with him for the time being. It's going to be a couple games in, a couple games out. He has pretty much put himself in that category with Jack St. Ivany and Ryan Shea, where they're just going to start rotating, being the sixth defenseman on certain nights. So I like this a lot. I want to see what that St. Ivany Shea pairing can do, because as you said, we were very encouraged by the way they ended last season. They had some very capable play. They were very positionally sound. They checked my box for bottom pairing defensemen. We didn't notice them that much. The only reason we noticed them was because they were new. They were young players who were getting a shot. So we kind of had that bias of we're going to pay extra attention when they're on the ice. But when you actually go back and watch their tape, they didn't really do a whole lot that was overly impressive. They just did the fundamental basic things you need to do to be a solid bottom pairing. And I would like to see that continue tonight, especially against a Vancouver team that can play some pretty fast hockey.
Right. And I feel like Ryan Shea played the best hockey of his Penguins tenure at the end of last season. You actually saw him grow a little bit as a player compared to this season, where you've seen him kind of taking a bit of a step back. And yes, part of it is his own play, but I think another part of it is I don't think he's been with the right partner, and maybe reuniting him with St. Ivany can have him rediscover the play that he had to end last season. Also similar with St. Ivany. I think this year he's also hit a bit of a sophomore slump, in my opinion. And I think if you're able to get him back with Shea, you can maybe get him at least closer to the level that we saw him end last season, because it was really encouraging how he was playing to end last season. The underlying numbers were good. The eye test backed up those numbers. It's just, again, he's hit a little bit of a second-year wall this year. So totally fine with that pairing being reunited if that's what it indeed looks like. And then Pettersson-Karlsson, no surprise. And then Pickering with Letang, I love it, man. You want to see what you have in this player. He's played very well since coming up from Wilkes-Barre. And if he continues to play well in these minutes, they may have no choice but to keep him up and not even send him down to Wilkes-Barre at this point, just because Grizzly's been bad this year. Ryan Graves, up and down. He's been, I guess, better in quotation marks this year compared to last year. But again, the bar was literally on the floor with how he played last year. I expect Graves to get back in at some point. But with the way it's dictated by performance right now, you got to keep Pickering in the lineup with the way he is playing. Forward lines, though, we also could look at a couple of changes. You have Rickard Rakell with Sidney Crosby and Brian Rust, which is nice. I like that they have both of them on Crosby's wings. Rakell plays really well with Sid, ditto with Rust. And then Anthony Beauvillier with Evgeni Malkin and Philip Tomasino. So I thought they were going to start Tomasino on the third line, but it seems like they're just going to throw him to the Wolves. And honestly, man, why not? The Penguins really have nothing to lose, as we discussed during our episode on Tuesday. Why not see what he can do with a franchise center in Evgeni Malkin? I'm very down with it. Third line, you have Michael Bunting, Blake Lizotte, and Drew O'Connor. Fine with that. And then fourth line, Matt Nieto, Noah Chari, and Kevin Hayes. The extras were Pustin, who of course was placed on waivers, was not claimed. And I saw some people were surprised about that. I'm kind of half and half, because I think he could be useful on other teams, but also other teams have players like Pustin as well. So again, I'm also not too surprised that he wasn't claimed either. And then Jesse Puljujarvi was also one of the extras. I'll keep saying it, man. I disagree with that. I think he is one of your 12 best forwards. I know you have a lot of other capable forwards, or at least NHL forwards in this lineup right now, but this lineup has to include Jesse Puljujarvi. You got to take someone out. It looks like he may not play tonight, but again, I disagree with that decision.
I do, but I also understand it, because we have been saying this, and so has pretty much everyone else, that they are fully in a mode where they're throwing whatever they can at the wall and see what sticks. And that's pretty much where this team is right now. And while I agree that Puljujarvi is probably one of your 12 best forwards, what's really the point, I think, because they're clearly not trying to win games right now. They're trying to showcase players they might want to flip, and that might be an argument for keeping him in, because if he continues to play solid hockey, you could probably get a return for him. But at the same time, you have your new young player in Tomasino. You want to see what he can do. You want to see what Blake Lizotte is capable of now that he is recovered. And really, at the end of the day, everything's in a blender right now because this team has not played well. And does that mean that you're not going to take out Evgeni Malkin? You're not going to take out Brian Rust. You're not going to take out Raquel or Crosby. So you pretty much have your top 6 set right there. And then at that point, you have 8 to 9 forwards battling for 6 spots. And when the team's not playing well, sorry, you're a bottom 6 player, no offense, but we're going to juggle things and we're going to give guys other opportunities. And I know people will say, well, I know what Kevin Hayes brings. He's been one of their fairly okay forwards in the bottom 6. So you can't really take him out. You could, but I landed on this one. This is where I want to end it with Puljujarvi. He's been a little too hot and cold. There have been 2 to 3 game stretches where he looks really good. There's been 2 to 3 game stretches where you don't really notice him. I think when you bring up guys like Matt Nieto, guys like Noel Acciari, and Kevin Hayes, while they haven't lit the world on fire, when they've been given the opportunity, they've taken advantage of it.
I understand what you're saying. I just think I would rather have someone like Puljujarvi in, who has been, I feel like, one of the few bright spots forward-wise this year on this team, rather than, I guess, one of the veterans who I think has been fine, but again, hasn't totally lit the world on fire. Again, I just would rather see Puljujarvi in the lineup on a nightly basis, because I think no matter what, he is one of your 12 best forwards. But I think that'll do it for this first segment. Coming up in the second segment, we're going to preview this game against the Canucks and give some keys as to how the Penguins can win this game against what I think is still one of the best teams in the Western Conference and will be a contender by the end of the season. But before we get to that, we have to tell you all about our first sponsor, and that is Built. If you are a renter, I would start taking advantage of Built if I were you. Here's the thing. We earn points on groceries, travel, and practically everything else we buy, but we should also be earning points on rent, one of our biggest monthly expenses. Built changed the game by letting renters earn high-value points on rent and around their neighborhood. There's no cost to join Built, and as a member, you'll earn valuable points on rent and on your everyday spending. Built points can also be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, and even the ones you haven't heard of. There are over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels and properties around the world that you can redeem your Built points towards. Points can also be redeemed towards a future and rent payment and unique experiences that only Built members can access. So if you're not earning points on rent, my question is, why not? Start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNHL. That's joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNHL. Make sure to use that URL so we know we sent you. Again, joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNHL to start earning points on your rent payments today. And we're not done. We still got to tell you all about our second sponsor, and that is Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. They filter out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't even have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They have priority Game Time Picks. Creation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. There's also all-in pricing. If you toggle that feature, it shows the total upfront for you with no surprise fees at checkout. You also get seat views, get a full view from your seat in the app before you buy. You also have the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Dam. So, Penguins Canucks, the annual Thanksgiving Eve game for the Penguins is finally here. And man, I love this crowd. It is such a great crowd. Even though the Penguins are one of the worst teams in the league this year, you know that crowd is going to be fired up. It's been like that every single year going back numerous years at PPG Paints Arena, and it's going to be no different tonight. And I'm excited. The Canucks are a really fun team to watch. They're coming off a 2-0 win over the Boston Bruins on Tuesday. They're now 11-6-3 this year. They got goals from Jake DeBrusk, who hurt his former team, and then they got the empty net goal from Connor Garland. Quinn Hughes got an assist, and also Pius Suter got an assist. And Kevin Lankinen, who has been outstanding on the road this season, got a 32 save shutout. I don't think we're going to get Lankinen tonight for the Canucks. I think it's probably going to be Arthur Shilovs, who was starting for the Canucks last year in place of Thatcher Demko. in the playoffs for the first 2 rounds. So this is going to be a lot of fun. You look up and down this Canucks roster, they're a deep team. Even without JT Miller, who we both hope is okay, this is still a very, and I mean a very good hockey team. You know, their first line with Elias Pettersson, with Sherwood and Jake DeBrusk. DeBrusk has been very good for the Canucks this year. You have former Penguin Danton Heinen on your second line, with another former Penguin, Teddy Bluger, on your second line with Brock Besser, Connor Garland with Pew Suter and Dakota Joshua. Joshua is back. He missed a little bit of the year already. And then you have Niels Höglander, who, hey, if the Penguins want to send Marcus Pettersson to Vancouver at some point, I will take one Niels Höglander back from the Canucks. Thank you very much. And then on the back end, they have Quinn Hughes, one of the 5 best defensemen on the planet. He is a treat to watch, especially with the puck on his stick. You have also Tyler Myers, Philip Hronek, Eric Brandstrom. So, Pat, when you look at this Canucks team, obviously the Penguins will have to take advantage that the Canucks played last night and they're traveling to Pittsburgh. But what are your keys for the Penguins getting a big upset win against the Canucks?
Don't fall asleep for a minute and a half like you did in Vancouver, especially if you have the lead, because we all remember that was a nightmare of a game. And the thing that stunk most about it is they played a very solid game against Vancouver. They just gave it away in a minute and 10 seconds or whatever it was, and the game completely flipped on its head. Now, I think that this is going to be more of an intangible kind of thing than it is any sort of analytic or strategy. You're probably going to have a fired up crowd tonight because it's Thanksgiving Eve. We're about 15 minutes into the show, so I can say this. It's Blackout Wednesday, so you know it's going to be a rowdy crowd. Take advantage of that, man. Like, just have fun with a game like this tonight, because it has not been a fun season. And you've got a new player. You've got Tomasino. You want to see what he can do. Give him a chance to run, see what he's got. And, I mean, listen, the Penguins' defensive core is not great. That's pretty obvious. But at this point, it feels like you are finally playing your optimal 6 for the Penguins on the back end. Ryan Graves and Matt Grzelcyk are likely to be out of the lineup. You've got 2 younger defensemen in St. Ivany and Ryan Shea. Let these guys run. Just let them play. And here's one other thing to keep in mind. 1, you've got nothing to lose tonight. You have the 3rd worst amount of points in the NHL, and you're taking on a Vancouver team that, get this, you know what their road record is this year? 8-1-0. So they are good away from Vancouver. This is a game where I'm not saying go out and play reckless, do anything dumb, play pond hockey, because you just went up and down their lineup. This is a good team. This is a very good Vancouver team. So if you try to turn this into a track meet, you're probably going to get run out of your own building. But you don't have to play this game high pressure. They're one of the best teams in the West. They've got cup aspirations. You're in the midst of a rebuild, retool on the fly. Just go out there, have some fun, play some loose-ish hockey, and try to surprise this team. Because here's one other thing about the Vancouver Canucks this year. Granted, there have been injuries. There have been other issues. We wish the absolute best to JT Miller, whatever's going on with him. He's away from the team. But their goal differential is +1. This is a team that should be filling the net. Doesn't seem like they are. And if you can play at least a modicum of good defense and take advantage of the opportunities you're inevitably going to get, this is a winnable game for the Penguins.
No, I agree with you. I think loose-ish is probably the good term for it, but I also, again, want to see them play simple. You saw how they turned that game into a little bit of a track meet in that game in Vancouver. The Penguins were playing fairly well. They then got too cute, and then they tried to just go blow for blow with the Canucks. And you know how good Vancouver's high-end talent is. They will make you pay every time, even though JT Miller is not playing in this game. So it would really make no sense to turn this one into just, again, odd man rush after odd man rush. You saw that in Vancouver as well. The Penguins were giving up way too many odd man rushes in that game, and it came back to bite them in the end. So,
and here's one other thing, Hunter. This is an important game for the Vancouver Canucks because they are sitting right now 3rd in the Pacific Division, but creeping right up behind them are the LA Kings and the Edmonton Oilers, who are both 1 point behind them. And we all know the old adage when it comes to the Stanley Cup playoffs. if you're in playoff position by American Thanksgiving, you've got a pretty good shot of making the Stanley Cup playoffs. And the Canucks drop this one and start falling down the wild card, it could be a bit of a struggle down the stretch for them. So they want to start making some headway and getting some separation from LA, from Edmonton, from Seattle. And this is a good spot for them to do it. And if you as the Penguins can play spoiler, at the very least, that's some joy you can take out of this season as the Penguins is you can spoil some seasons for some other teams.
And you can make life difficult for a few of your former teammates and a few of your former coaches, of course, since Rick Tocchet is the head coach of the Canucks. A little bit on a personal note, I always love this game because I love getting the chance to watch it with some of my family who I really just don't get the chance to watch many games with, especially someone like my mom, who she's the biggest reason why I'm into Penguins hockey these days. So getting the chance to sit down and watch this game with her, even though the Penguins are one of the worst teams in hockey, I'll never take something like that for granted. And I always love, again, when these two teams play. They played such a great game. Do you remember the game 5 years ago, Pat? 8-6 final. The Penguins were down 6-3 in the third period. This was November 2019. And Dominic Cahoon scores. Zach Aston Reese ties the game. You get Chris Letang gets the game winner. Evgeni Malkin gets the empty net goal to make it 8-6. That is still, of the Thanksgiving Eve games in recent memory, that's still my favorite one for the Penguins.
Oh, that one was so much fun. And I'm probably misremembering, but I will be gladly be corrected just because it was a holiday game. It was either Thanksgiving or around Christmas. But do you remember the game against the New York Rangers that went to a shootout that we thought was over and the Rangers had won, but video review found that it was a double doink and the puck had been touched, so the goal didn't count, and they come back out. The Penguins get a win. Now, that may have been more closer to Christmas than it was Thanksgiving, but I remember it happened when I was in college and I was at home hanging with friends watching the game, not in some crappy dorm room at IUP watching the game. So anytime the Penguins have games in and around the holidays, not only do they decide to turn it into one of the most epic games of your memory, it's also a fun crowd. So this is continually one of the best games of the year.
I actually do remember that. It was not closer to Christmas. It was before Thanksgiving. It was November 15th, 2014, because it was Dan Boyle that did it. He had the disallowed goal, and the Penguins came back and won that game one round later in the shootout. It was really fun. But yes, I remember that game like it was yesterday. And I also want to see what Tomasino can do in this game. It's his first game as a Penguin. He's getting the opportunity of a lifetime to play with Evgeni Malkin. He even said to the media on Tuesday, the Penguins were his favorite team growing up, and Evgeni Malkin was one of his favorite players. So that's a really cool storyline. And I also do want to see more of that pairing with Pickering and Letang. Is Letang able to turn his game around a little bit now that Pickering is next to him, compared to Grzelcyk? That's something I'm also going to be keeping my eye on as well. And of course, number 35, Tristan Jarry. I do think as a whole, since coming back from Wilkes-Barre, he has been a little bit better. He's had some really bad moments, but I think in terms of his overall play, he's been a bit better. Again, the bar is very low, but we'll see how he does in this one against the Canucks. But that'll do it for the second segment. Coming up to end the show, it's Wednesday. You all know what that means. It's time for Pat and I to give out our Warrior helmet for the week, even though this team has been very bad for the last week. But before we get to that, we got to tell you all about our last sponsor, and that is FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook betting partner of the NFL. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Dam. So, Pat, we really don't have too many candidates for this last week, considering how poorly the Penguins have played. But I do think one player stands above the rest, and that is Captain Sidney Crosby. Gets his 600th goal. Need I say more, buddy? I think it's pretty obvious that he should be getting the Warrior helmet. If it weren't for that, I would probably give the helmet to you all, the listeners, the fans, for dealing with this crap of a season so far, and honestly how bad this last week was. So Crosby as the player gets it, but if it weren't for him, it's you all, the fans. Thank you guys for tuning in and listening to us talk about this team, and thank you to you guys for watching every single game as well.
Yeah, that you had the exact same thought process that I did, which shows that we have been doing this show together for quite some time now, because we're on the same brainwave at this point. Yeah, it's got to go to Sid. I mean, it was a miserable week here in the land of the Pittsburgh Penguins, but Sidney Crosby becomes the 21st player in NHL history to score 600 goals. He becomes one of another players along with Mario Lemieux to score 600 or more goals with one franchise, which is just an absolutely incredible achievement in and of itself. And I will say this, for as bad as the Penguins have been the last couple of weeks, it does seem like Crosby is starting to somewhat figure it out. He's starting to look a lot more like himself. And as I said on Monday's show, after he recorded goal number 600, that weight has been lifted off of his shoulders. You could see at the very least when it came to his offensive game the last few weeks, he knew that he was one goal away from that historic milestone, and he was gripping the stick a little bit tighter. He was being a little bit more hesitant with his shot selection. So now that he gets it out of the way against Utah, scores that 5-on-3 power play goal, makes the history, he can probably play a little bit looser in the offensive zone. So yes, my Warrior helmet as well goes to Captain Sidney Crosby.
And I won't be surprised if he has another big game tonight, especially against the Canucks. He's played very well against the Canucks throughout his career. 24 points, 12 goals, 12 assists in 24 games against the Canucks, including points in 11 of his last 15 against Vancouver. 8 goals, 9 assists during that time. So he's been fantastic against the Canucks throughout his career. And again, would not be surprising in the slightest to see him do it again tonight against the Canucks. But I think that'll do it for today's episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. But you will get another episode of the show on Thursday, because Pat and I are going to be doing something pretty rare for this show. So after the game tonight, we'll be recording right about 9:45, 10 o'clock for a full game recap to be posted around midnight Thursday morning for those on the East Coast, so we can go and spend time with our families on Thanksgiving on Thursday, at least in the United States of America. We won't record on Thursday, so we'll have that episode for you all recording tonight out on Thursday, but then we'll record Friday, get you all set for Penguins Bruins, another big game for both teams as well. So again, thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to / watch this one. And also thank you guys over the last year for always take the time to listen to / watch this show. We are very thankful for everyone that tunes in to listen to us rant and rave about this crazy hockey team in the Steel City. We really appreciate it. And to everyone in the United States, happy Thanksgiving from the bottom of our hearts. And we will talk to you all on Thursday morning with a recap of this game against the Canucks. See you then.